Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever edition of the Armchair Politicast. If you ever wanted your news to be presented by two British idiots, you've come to the right place. I am John Dinsdale. I am joined by my co-host, Carl Varley.
Hello, everybody.
And yeah, this is going to be a semi-regular, however we feel like doing it. Well, podcast to start with. We
Yeah,
might
depending how
eventually
lazy we're feeling.
Pokemon Evolution up to video, but
Ooh,
for now
very fancy.
we're gonna just see how this goes. And what better way to set an agenda for a new show by talking about the biggest news story that has kind of dominated for the past few weeks, that is slowly starting to, well, fizzle out again, which is a bad thing, really, because it should still be talked about. We are, of course, talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict, something that has a whole lot to talk about, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting time for global politics. Usually everyone's bending over backwards for China. This time, we're all bending over backwards for Israel and Netanyahu, though that might change now that he's about to get the boot.
Yeah, for this first edition, we're going to kind of talk about the events that led up to what essentially could be quite the seismic shift in Israel's politics, if it actually works, considering their track record with
If there is any
elections of,
change.
yeah, and their track record with elections of the past 2 years has been less than stellar, considering.
Even if they do manage to take over, most people don't think there's going to be that much change, and it's going to be eventually more of the same, especially with whoever the guy who's going to eventually become their new prime minister. He's not a very good person. Shock.
No. Oh, for the record, we're going to put a disclaimer here. Everything we say, unless like we actually have facts and statistics for, is most likely going to be our opinion. Don't take any of this too seriously. And for the instant people who want to automatically defend Israel, we are not attacking the Israeli people, just the far right government that doesn't represent them properly.
Nor are we supporting Hamas. I think that's also a thing that should be said. Because, funnily enough, people always think you can only have one view on something. You can't have, just a bit of nuance and see things from multiple angles. No. If I'm anti-Israel, I'm pro-Hamas, obviously. That's the way it has to be.
So we are just here to present facts and basically, yes, talk very, very openly about how one-sided this conflict has been. In fact, calling it a conflict a bit generous. It's more like glorified
Jeez.
schoolyard bullying with more homicides.
No, it's perfectly reasonable. Just self-defense. Come on.
So, all of this started a few weeks back with what could ultimately be described as the world's worst rocket attack from Hamas in
Yes.
retaliation to Israel celebrating a day of conquest.
Hmm.
They they fired
Well, it
what?
was more than that. There's multiple events that led up to them firing the rockets.
Yeah, but to sort of classify the straw that broke the camel's back per se.
Yeah.
At least that's what was widely reported at the
Hmm.
time.
And if we're being real, the real reason is that both sides were just looking to keep in power. Hamas, because they're psychopaths who want to kill all the Jews. Netanyahu, because he's a psychopath who's addicted to power.
Yeah, he's trying to collect territories like Lego pieces. It's not a
Yeah.
it's not a good look.
No.
So yeah, they Hamas fired 43,
4,300 rockets they fired and killed, wait for it, grand total, 12 people.
which yes,
It's
isn't good.
tragic.
Like
No. 12
no
people.
one
I think even breaking it down as well, 2 of those 12 were children. 3 of them were foreign nationals, so not even Israeli citizens, and 1 of them was a soldier.
Now, in no way is this good. No one should be dying in rocket attacks, but just think
No,
4,300 rockets and only 12 casualties. Because
God knows how
Israel,
many of their own people they killed with those rockets.
yeah, because they don't have the most stable firing mechanisms.
Remarkably inaccurate, even if they do manage to get to the Iron Dome.
Which, yes, Israel has an Iron Dome defense system, which basically shoots down most of these rockets before they can even make it onto Israeli soil. It just wasn't a very smart move, and it really didn't do them any favors.
No, and now the Palestinian casualties, which are obviously very fair and, in proportion, 253, according to the UN, 66 of which were children, and at least 129 of these were civilians.
And we would just like to clarify, Palestine does not have a Iron Dome defense system.
No,
The Gaza Strip is literally
they don't
just an
have
open
defense
air.
systems.
The Gaza Strip is just an open air prison, really, and apparently a firing range for Israeli rockets.
Or they could leave whenever they want, out of that blockaded port, or those airports that they're not allowed to fly out of, or all those roads that are blockaded by the Israeli security forces. Just leave whenever they want. It's not a prison.
And it's not like, why would you want to leave when you've got
Yeah.
5 hours a day of electricity? A lack of jobs. Very little in the way of
I think
regular
they have
water.
the highest unemployment in the world, I'm pretty sure. Well, it's definitely up there. No.
It's because it's one of the most densely populated areas
Yeah.
on the entire planet, and it's tiny.
Especially now, it's just a much nicer place after Israel have helped them out. You're saying 5 hours a day of electric. Also, 800,000 people without regular, safe drinking water. 9 hospitals damaged, 19 clinics damaged, and 58 educational facilities damaged. So, they're making it a nicer place to live
As you can see,
for
they're all
the Palestinian citizens.
hotspots.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to live there?
Not to mention, your state media has been completely destroyed, and they celebrated your demise with some nice memes.
No, it was Hamas. It was all Hamas. That, building with the AP press and Al Jazeera, it was Hamas. That surely the two best press companies in the region wouldn't be able to tell Hamas was in their building. So it was up to the Israeli security force to tell them that they were.
And the worst thing is, nobody living in those tower blocks, because they didn't just destroy one, couldn't really gather what little belongings they probably had and scarf because they were given 1 hour. It's like, you've got an hour. Was it an hour?
Yeah, they gave them an hour to evacuate. There was a famous video going around with the head of the officers. He was asking them to give them more time to get all of their equipment and whatnot out of the building. But the guy in the end was like, nope, we're just going to bomb it.
And it achieved nothing. Because,
even if they did hit it, if they didn't leave even, it would still be a war crime, because just because you give them a warning doesn't mean they have to leave.
Yeah. And the worst thing is, we've learned in the past that Hamas does use civilian buildings, but
of course they do.
Israel,
they're horrible people.
Yeah, but they didn't give any source of this information. It was just like, oh, we just knew, and it's like, but did you?
Well, everywhere's Hamas. The Qatari Red Cross offices that they hit, that was Hamas.
The road to the only medical facility in the area?
Tunnels. It's lousy with tunnels, guys. Honestly, I'm surprised any of it is able to be standing. It's not just collapsing in giant sinkholes because how many tunnels there are. It's crazy.
And
Not
you
that
can,
the tunnels don't exist, but God, it's definitely over exaggerated to make the targeting easier.
and it's not like, you know, the people had a legitimate right to be pissed off, even if most of them did so peacefully, because the after effects of the continuous rocketing and attacks and the gratuitous displays of force caused shockwaves around different regions, including the sort of Arab, Palestinian, Jewish parts of Israel, where infighting broke out and rioting occurred.
Yeah, the main area that's been highlighted, obviously, the Al Aqsa Mosque, which was part of the lead up to this conflict. There was conflict at the mosque beforehand, there was conflicts during, and as soon as the ceasefire was signed, there was conflicts not long after.
Because again, nothing says ceasefire like violence a few hours after. It's like nice
Yeah.
way to honor it for a few minutes.
Obviously, there's lots of varying reports on how these conflicts started, so it's impossible to say who's in the right, but I'm less inclined to believe the Israelis' official stories because they have a very high interest in painting everyone as the villains, so the rest of the world continues to support them.
And the worst thing is this sort of bullshit has been going on since the 50s because in the West Bank and Sheikh Jarrah and various other areas, Palestinians are forced out of their homes. There's a lot of illegal settling, surveillance, conflicts. You name it. Israel is just trying to take over and eradicate their territory.
Well, yeah, like before then, since 1948, Palestine controlled 100% of the region. Now they control 15% of the region. Because, this is just historic Israeli land. And it's also historic Greek land and Roman land and Ottoman land. So, why don't the Greeks and the Italians and the Turks come and all take over Israel? They have as much right as the Israelis do.
We are not calling for that before anyone jumps on
No, of
obvious
course not.
sarcasm.
But that's the reasoning, the logic that they're using. I'm fairly sure that the region of Israel has been out of control of the Jews for longer than it has been. It's been under control of so many different people that no one has a solid claim on it. Like, God, why don't the Crusaders come back? Oh, they were there. I'll just take over.
And it's not just that like Israel wants to expand. There are people rooting for Israel because of doomsday prophecies.
Ooh, those evangelical Christians. Super fun.
I knew you'd want to get that in, so this just
Well,
feels like
yeah.
the perfect segue.
Who doesn't love let's be fair, a doomsday cult? Because evangelical Christians want the Jews to be in control of Jerusalem so that the second coming of Jesus Christ can happen and everyone dies. And all the true believers get to go up to heaven. And the rest of us, I guess either we just die or we suffer here on earth for the rest of eternity. It's not going to be fun.
I do love all these doomsday cultists forgetting that wrath is a sin.
Yeah, jeez.
But yes, that also leads nicely onto sort of the wider effects outside of Israel and Palestine, because we've obviously seen and read and continuously been like more bombarded with information than Gaza was with rockets about what was going on. We've had all sorts of different takes, we've had all sorts of different approaches, and a whole lot of inaction from some of the key players in the like the more rich and wealthy parts of the world.
Cough, cough, America, cough, cough. the British government,
Cough,
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 Canada.
Canada.
Because there were multiple attempts to cut this conflict short. And not only were Israel refusing to cooperate, but
Hmm.
many
Multiple
of the
ceasefire offers by Hamas during the conflict, I should add, all turned down by Israel.
so again, do you want to really call this a fair conflict? This was just bullying with more death.
And talking about the foreign governments, it was them stopping any investigation into whether any human rights violations were taking place. Like, bombing the press and medical facilities and indiscriminately targeting civilians.
And basically every other hellhole scenario you have inside of Gaza.
It's a lovely place. Like I said, leave whenever they want.
It's almost like they're just trying to mock everyone. It's like, oh, you can see what's going on, but you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
It's it's like just to go on tangent for a minute because there was an interesting news story this week. There was a they've got no government power, but there is like a human court that is overseeing a load of evidence between China and the Uyghurs to try
Oh
and
yeah.
determine
Yeah.
if there are if there's human rights violations there as well.
I
Because
mean,
obviously,
ignoring the Uyghurs, there is human rights
yeah,
violations going on in China regardless.
it's they're basically committing ethnic cleansing, and everyone's letting them get away with it. And this court is going through a whole ton of evidence, and apparently it's going to take until September when they reconvene. But I find it interesting that it's a human court with no political power.
Yeah.
And in a similar situation, we had everyone decrying Israel's actions, blatant evidence it was war crimes, and people still sort of
Well,
trying
when
to
there's no official
downplay it.
court ruling it, then all the world leaders can just turn their eyes and be like, nope, not happening. I don't see it. It's
Yeah,
all lies and slander.
like literally one day there's going to be like some glorified ad campaign for a reality TV show that just takes the piss out of every world conflict we've had. There'll be some alien
Jeez.
civilization enjoying it. It'll literally be called, I can't believe it's not war crimes. And it'll just be footage of this, and then world leaders going, we don't
Yeah.
see it.
No war crimes and no apartheid happening in Israel. Now, I've got a nice chunk of text here from Human Rights Watch, who did a report on whether or not it was apartheid in the region. So we're ready. This is going to be a big chunk of text. Israeli authorities have deprived millions of people of their basic rights by virtue of their identity as Palestinians. These long-standing policies and systematic practices box in, dispossess, forcibly separate, marginalize, and otherwise inflict suffering on Palestinians. In the OPT, movement restrictions, land expropriation, forcible transfer, denial of residency and nationality, and the mass suspension of civil rights constitute inhumane acts set out under the Apartheid Convention and the Rome Statute. Under both legal standards, inhumane acts, when carried out amidst systematic oppression and with the intent to maintain domination, make up a crime against humanity of apartheid. Collectively, these policies and practices in the OPT severely deprive Palestinians of fundamental human rights, including to residency, private property, and access to land, services, and resources on a widespread and systematic basis. When committed with discriminatory intent on the basis of a victim's identity as part of a group or collectivity, they amount of crime against humanity, of persecution under the Rome Statute and customary international law. Separately from inhumane acts carried out in the OPT, the Israeli government violates the rights of Palestinians inside Israel on account of their identity, including measures that have made it virtually impossible for tens of thousands of Palestinian Bedouins living in the Negev to live lawfully in the communities, denied to hundreds of thousands of Palestinians the ability to access or use land confiscated from them historically, the effective bar on citizens and residents obtaining long-term legal status to, and thereby living permanently together in Israel with spouses from the West Bank and Gaza, which deprives them of the ability to live together permanently in Israel, and the denial of residency rights to Palestinians who fled or were expelled from their homes in the events around the establishment of the state. These abuses continue, and there is no indication that authorities have investigated, much less held accountable, anyone involved in their commission. From the Human Rights Watch. So, just a lovely fun time that's happening over there. Definitely not apartheid, guys.
Definitely not millions upon millions of people being persecuted for their race, nationality, and identity.
Oh, it's all coincidence. They're all terrorists, a lot of them.
All Hamas.
All of them.
The children.
Not just the men, but the women and the children too.
Because we all know that Hamas has the resources and intelligence to make sleeper agents.
God. I would be surprised if they thought that was a thing.
It all sounds so
crazy
ridiculous.
Enough. Yeah.
And the world just let them get away with it for so damn long.
But the Holocaust.
Yes, it was
because Jews have suffered. They could do whatever they want now. No, that's not how it works. It's like there's a reason victims and people related to victims are not allowed anywhere near juries or criminal cases because they're biased and they're personally attached.
And we don't want to see a repeat of that. We see enough genocides in this world without one of said victims coming back to perpetuate the cycle of abuse on more people who don't deserve it.
There's a lot of genocide going on right now.
Exactly.
One that constantly gets shadowed over is Tigray crisis in Ethiopia.
There's the oil spill over there as well, which nobody can deal with because they can't get near it.
It's a real mess.
And this is why we kind of almost wanted to start this show, because we talk about all these issues and then we never really see them represented properly, or people don't talk about it fully.
Well, you see one story, then bam, out of the news cycle, no one cares anymore. It's like, I care. None of this should be happening. It is disgusting that we're all just accepting of it.
So off the bleak tangent, we did eventually reach a ceasefire on May 20th. Everyone finally put their heads together and we were able to temporarily, for like a few hours,
stop
any of the violence. And
the conflict is officially ended for now.
Yeah, everyone shake hands, go hug, we'll make a peace sign under an elf. Oh wait, nope. Because before you know it, they'll be right back to doing it again when they're out of the public eye, because this is a system that has been going on for decades unchecked.
It's not the best.
However, we do have a new piece on the chessboard to watch, because we've seen something new that hasn't really been able to happen in the past 2 years, and we might see the first change of power in about 12 years, because Benjamin Netanyahu is being ousted by every competition politician in Israel right now.
Yeah, I've got a little thing. New coalition includes Yair Lapid, who is a centrist politician, Naftali Bennett, who would be poised to become the prime minister and would be Israel's first religiously Jewish prime minister, who leads a far-right nationalist party, and at the last minute, Mansour Abbas, who's an Islamist Arab party, has also joined the party, the coalition, which is quite a twist because I don't think any Arabs have ever been part of the Israeli government.
And so this kind of just goes to show how united the people are against Benjamin Netanyahu and the damage he's done to the PR relations of Israel and the world, like the world reputation of it. Not that it was already gleaming before, but the fact that these three parties are working together for now.
No, because they all hate him that much. They're
Like,
so sick of his bullshit.
which is incredible. Like, will it achieve anything? Who's to say, considering it's going to be
If
another.
Bennett has his way, then no, because he will continue the expansion and will be no better than Netanyahu. If he is managed to tempered by Lapid and Abbas, then there's some hope. Abbas so far has been promised as much as $1.5 billion a year for the northern provinces of Israel, the majority Arabs, and the official recognition of Bedouin villages in the Negev desert to stop their demolition, something that, if you remember, I mentioned before in the Human Rights Watch's conclusion on whether Israel was committing apartheid.
Yes, and on the other side, Naftali Bennett, who, as you said, is likely to become the next prime minister, is a former commander and self-made tech millionaire who says he is further to the right than Benjamin Netanyahu and rejects the concept of a Palestinian state.
Yeah, he's just not a great guy.
And it should be.
I'm pretty sure there's like secret tapings of him bragging about killing quite a lot of Arabs as well.
This is the even funnier bit. This is from the BBC article, sort of profiling him. Mr. Bennett has long held ambitions to be Prime Minister, but his expected nomination is remarkable, given his right-wing nationalist party, Yamina, won only a handful of seats in the last general election. They came joint fifth, and now he's going to be the leader of all this. And he should be.
For now, they are going to have a rotation with Lapid, so that'll be interesting.
But it's
yes, like I was saying, I just found the quote. Bennett is on record as advocating the murder of Palestinians taken prisoner. The former Israeli Defense Force officer says, quote, "I've killed lots of Arabs in my life, and there's no problem with that," end quote.
So yeah, with an opinion like that on your own coalition, it's hard to see progress really being made.
I just found a really fun one. The number 2 on his party list, Ayelet Shaked, has called for genocide of Palestinians. She posted on Facebook saying, quote, "The entire Palestinian people is the enemy," end quote, and justifies its destruction, quote, "including its elderly and its women, its cities and its villages, its property and its infrastructure," end quote. She calls for the slaughter of Palestinian mothers who give birth to little snakes.
Sorry, if we just found Marjorie Taylor Greene's burn account.
I think we might have.
Like, Jesus Christ, that's fucking insane.
Yeah, fun times.
So, yeah, don't get your hopes up just yet.
Yeah, the one positive is at least it's not Netanyahu anymore.
We might see him finally, like, face consequences for his corruption charges. You might finally see some repercussions for favoring his allies and himself over his country. It's hard to tell at this current time, but with the sort of coverage of Israel dying down with the formation of this new coalition, it felt like the right time to just recap everything one last time before the media forgets about it and goes on to something else, because that's inevitably what happens in the cycle of news.
I'm looking now, and they're has been some fun updates over there in like the last day or so.
Oh,
Israel arrested a Palestinian activist. Oh, two Palestinian activists, Muna and Mohammed Al Kurd. I think one of those, the Mohammed, he was on CNN or which one was it?
he was on a few. I
Yeah, he went on a lot of Western media and he was talking. And they have also Israel also arrested an Al Jazeera journalist yesterday. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows yet. There's still
no,
stuff that needs reporting on, and it's really not being talked about by Western media. These stories are both coming out of Al Jazeera.
so yeah, it fell into the hands of a journalism graduate and a teaching assistant.
Yeah,
Why not?
that's the obvious things that should happen in everyone's favorite country, where nothing bad happens.
Yep. So we're all going to book tickets to that tourism hotspot, the Gaza Strip, when
Yeah.
coronavirus eventually ends.
Well, I hear the fireworks are amazing.
Yeah, to die for.
Oh,
Uh, so that about wraps up our sort of Israel story.
yeah, I think so. We had a quite a good discussion on what's happened over there.
So yeah, that basically wraps up episode one. Yeah, we probably set social media accounts up for this if we can remember. Be sure to keep tuned
At
to
some
where
point.
be sure to stay tuned to wherever the hell we upload this because there'll be more coming when we get round to it. Schedules are messy at the best of times.
That's one way of putting it.
But yeah, there's plenty of news to talk about. We'll probably try to round up the week's stuff because not every week will have a topic as massive as this.
No, although obviously there are a few big topics that do bear discussion. I'd rather like to have a big discussion on China, a big discussion on the current state of UK politics and corruption would be interesting.
Basically, that's probably our next two episodes down the pipeline. So be on the lookout for them.
Until next time.
Yeah, we've been the Armchair Politicast. Goodbye.